we've got the California Fire Marshal, Daniel Berlant. Chief Berlant, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've got a lot to cover here, but first off, what was the cause of the fires that are right now raging through California? And is there any indication that in any of them, in any of these major fires, that arson was a factor?
Yeah, right now we are still actively investigating how each of these fires has started. We have not determined a cause on any of the major fires burning in the Los Angeles area, but our investigators are working to not only determine exactly where the fire started, but how the fire started. But what really is important to note here is that it's because of the weather conditions, the extreme winds, hurricane-like winds, that really allowed that simple ignition from whatever caused it, that was simple spark, to quickly grow into massive wildfires doing significant destruction. It's the weather conditions, obviously unusual and historic for conditions like this in January, but it is our drought conditions and the weather that really has led to such explosive fire growth.
Okay, well, I guess that raises the obvious question here. What can be done to mitigate this in the future? And I know that we're going to hear that solutions are too expensive, but more expensive than dealing with the fallout from these fires? I mean, reporting just today suggests that these fires could cost a record $150 billion, and they're still raging, meaning that that number is inevitably going to go up. So I refuse to accept that we just kind of have to be sitting ducks here for the next ones.
We have continued to increase our firefighting capabilities, adding more equipment, more firefighters, new technologies, more aircraft, more equipment, but really responding our way out of these fires is not going to happen. We have to do more in the resiliency space. And the governor and the legislature has done significant investments, billions of dollars in the last couple of years in fire preparedness around communities and overall forest health. That has to be our focus. It is not as simple as being able to change the changing climate that we've experienced, the drought conditions, the extreme weather events. We have to become resilient to these type of activities. And so you're right, we can't just sit back and do nothing. We have to be prepared. Now, the team that I lead, we work very hard on not only preventing fires, but also preparing communities. That means hardening homes, building new homes to a higher standard that can withstand the embers of wildfires, creating defensible space, planning overall communities to allow for evacuation. These are the things that we have to focus on in community hardening, but also at the same time, making sure that our forests are healthy. Now, in this situation, most of these fires started in urban settings and have burnt into wildland areas or created what we call conflagration, where it's just burning home to home to home. But many of our fires in California are burning in our forested lands or our wildland areas that are overgrown, are unhealthy, are extremely dry. And so ensuring that our ecosystems at a landscape level are also addressed. And so it really is not a one solution. We have to do all of these things. Focus on the response and fire suppression resources, preparing our communities, hardening them, becoming more resilient, but also addressing our overall forest health.
Well, to that point then, is for example, would one simple solution moving forward, if we're going to modernize our grid or modernize our infrastructure, could, for example, when we have inevitable high winds from the Santa Ana winds, is it smart moving forward to build transformers and put power lines underground? Is that something that we should be doing moving forward?
Hardening our grid, whether it be undergrounding or with materials that are less likely to cause a spark, but also vegetation management around our utility infrastructures are all critical components. Now, the state and particularly our major utilities have done a lot in this space. In fact, we have an entire new department that regulates making sure that our utilities are planning for hardening their systems, undergrounding their systems, and holding them accountable to doing that. Now, while we don't know yet exactly the cause of these fires, we know that we have done a lot to make sure that we are reducing the sparks caused by utility infrastructure and holding our utilities accountable to making sure that the vegetation around their facilities, around their lines, are cleared, so it reduces the likelihood that if something goes wrong. Remember, these are hurricane-like winds. 80 to 100 mile an hour winds, of course, are going to knock down power lines and other infrastructure. That if that happens, and when that happens, that they don't actually have any vegetation around them to spark a fire. Obviously, undergrounding does that by the course of nature of having it underneath the ground. It's not susceptible to the weather conditions, but that's very costly. And so there is a big mixture of things that the state has done to focus on making sure our utilities are more resilient towards the climate, but also to overall reduce their ignition of wildfires like we have seen since really the 2017 and a number of years between then and now.
I mean, to your point about it being costly, yes, again, it's costly, but like not more costly than the devastation that we're seeing right now. I mean, I know again that the refrain that we're going to hear, especially from folks whose job it is to allocate funds, is that how are we going to afford it? But my pushback to that is how can we afford not to do it? I mean, what's the cost of not doing this stuff? We are recording this right now on Friday, January 10th. As of now, what's the degree of containment for these fires, especially the Palisades and the Eaton fires, which are the largest?
Yeah, despite strong wind conditions continuing, red flag warnings today, our firefighters are making progress. The Palisades fire, which is in the Pacific Palisades, Topanga Canyon area, has burned just over 20,000 acres. It now is 8% contained. That is up. There was no containment as of last night. Over in the Pasadena area, north of Los Angeles, Pasadena, Altadena, the Eaton fire has burned just under 14,000 acres. And crews have done a really good job of slowing the spread of that fire, though containment right now is only at 3%. But let me end here with a really good news. Yesterday, we had a new fire break out called the Kenneth Fire in the West Hills area of Los Angeles and Ventura counties. Quickly burned 1,000 acres. A strong initial attack on the ground and in the air. We've been able to hold that fire at check. And today it is 35% contained. The forward spread of that fire as well has started. Now, over the next couple of days, we'll continue to see those containment numbers go up. But we are expecting the winds to continue to be very strong into the weekend. And we actually could see a Santa Ana wind event early next week. And so we'll be preparing to ensure that we not only can hold the containment lines that we've been working so hard to build, but also be ready to respond to new fires that break out, again, with these weather conditions and the extreme fire risk.
So I know folks are watching and perplexed at how for days the containment could just be a few percentage points, 8%, 3%. Can you shed some light onto that? How, I believe that these first sparked, I think the first fire was the Palisades fire that sparked either late morning on Tuesday. And so can you give some insight into how, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 days now this thing has been raging, that we can be at 8%?
On Tuesday, when the Palisades fire broke out, fanned by those, again, hurricane level winds, it quickly was able to spread as firefighters were responding in. Their main focus was life safety, just evacuating residents. And so that often can be the case in these fast moving fires in urban areas, is we have to focus on rescues, getting people just out of the area and then begin our attack. The other challenge that hampers us when we have 80 to 90 mile an hour winds is our aircraft is not only ineffective, but it's not safe. And so that's a tool then that can't fight the fire. So our firefighters on the ground are helping evacuations. The aircraft were not able to fly. And so that really hampers our efforts towards containment. Once, though, we're able to get people evacuated, it really allows firefighters to focus on going direct on a fire, starting to build containment lines. Fortunately, yesterday, the wind started to die down, and that's when we really hit it hard. All these fires hit them hard from the air with our aircraft, our air tankers, our helicopters, the National Guard. We are throwing everything at it, and that is what is allowing us to start to see those containment numbers go up. But it is not unusual in situations like this, in urban fires like this, that in the first 24, 48 hours, that we're not simply focused on saving people's lives.
So I live about a mile from the Sunset Fire that was in the Hollywood Hills, and obviously it was beyond grateful to see how quickly that one was contained, and that one since has been contained to 100%. Why the difference between the containment between that fire, the Sunset Fire, versus a fire like the Palisades?
There are so many complexities to where's the fire start? Where are the available resources? Now, we pre-positioned fire resources. We increased our staffing going in to this week's fire danger. We brought fire equipment and firefighters from Northern California down to Southern California. But you never know when a fire is going to break out, where that spark is going to be. And so that can hamper the response. Luckily, with the Sunset Fire, by the time it broke out, really on day 2, the night of day 2 of this fire siege, the aircraft was able to fly. So we were able to use our newly invested money into night flying helicopters to really make an aggressive attack on that fire that night. And that's what really held that one at bay, where the other ones were able to obviously burn at an explosive rate. So there's weather factors, there's the complexity of homes in the immediate area. Those are always the things that come into play of how quickly we can get at scene of a fire.
You'd mentioned being able to use these new aircrafts. You'd mentioned firefighters coming down from Northern California. What's the scope of the assistance that we're getting down here in Southern California? From where are firefighters coming? Is it across, is it just contained within the state? Is it other states that are sending firefighters in? Are we seeing firefighters from other countries coming in?
We are fortunate here in California to have the most robust firefighting mutual aid system, arguably in the world. We also here in California own and operate at CAL FIRE the largest wildland aerial fleet in the world. And so many of the firefighters are local. They're the first ones at the scene. The City of Los Angeles Fire Department, LA County Fire Department, Ventura County Fire Department, our CAL FIRE resources in Southern California. But every fire department in every corner of the state was requested to send assistance. Today, Friday, we have more than 8,000 firefighters, law enforcement officers, emergency support services at scene of these fires. But we've been bringing in resources from many of our western states. Oregon has sent hundreds of firefighters down to us. Colorado, Washington, Idaho, New Mexico, Nevada, the list goes on. A lot of firefighting resources from other states. What's really, it is so unfortunate what is happening right now. But the fact that we're in January experiencing these conditions, the rest of the nation is not in the typical fire season. And so fortunately, we were really able to get a lot of resources from our neighboring states who are not experiencing the same conditions as Southern California. We're also, though, talking to our international partners, British Columbia, for one. We've been doing a lot of work with them over the last several years. And the British Columbia Wildfire Services is sending incident managers over to help support us as well. And so really, arguably, this is an international response to aid us, though in California, again, with our local, state, federal, tribal firefighting force, we've got a lot of firefighters on the front lines right now.
Okay, so let's pivot to a different section here, because there have been a lot of rumors and misinformation floating around. So I'm hoping you can address some of this. Right off the bat, Donald Trump suggested onto Truth Social that Gavin Newsom should have opened some sort of spigot from Northern California to Southern California to allow water to flow. Can you speak on the legitimacy of that claim?
I don't want to get into the politics of the president or the future president, but it is so important to note that every community has a different water system. In Pacific Palisades, their water system is really based on storage tanks and reservoirs. And with the extreme amount of homes that caught on fire in the early hours, every hydrant was running and water was being used faster than water could be replenished. But there is no spigot from Northern California to Pacific Palisades that could have kept up with this firefight. Lots of people saying, well, why aren't you using water right out of the ocean? And again, it's just not that simple. But firefighters, we use other tactics. It's not just water that help us battle these fires. We're using mechanical equipment like bulldozers, chainsaws, and other efforts. But the governor leaned in and he had us push forward well over 100 water tender trucks that brought in water to that area. So not only did the water supply able to work as the best as it could to keep up with the need, but we also brought water in from other areas. Our helicopters, once we could fly aircraft, could pick up water from neighboring reservoirs or even swimming pools and drop water on it. But again, let's come back to the magnitude of these fires. Again, it's not just one home on fire. It's not just two homes. It's thousands of homes on fire at the same time. There really is no water supply that's going to be able to keep up with that. And that is, again, where we go into rescue mode first, structure defense second.
What about the notion that prior to the fires even erupting, that there was no water in the reserves?
I can't speak for the water department in Los Angeles. What I can tell you, though, is our firefighters on the ground that night had water.
Okay.
Again, when every fire hydrant is flowing, the pressure is going to go down. It's such a taxing piece. Obviously, that's going to be a discussion for us afterwards. Back to, what can we do to ensure that some of these older neighborhoods that maybe don't have the same municipal water supply and flow, that adequate water is available. In many communities, we've granted out money to help with water tanks and other auxiliary water supplies. In fact, we have requirements in our building code for homes in more wildland areas to ensure they have water supply on site, whether it be a pond or in a water tank. And so I think those are going to all be things that after the emergency, we continue to work through. But to have politics come into play, to question, why water wasn't flowing from north to south, that wasn't going to make a difference in these extreme weather conditions.
Speaker Mike Johnson had come out and issued a claim on Twitter that the forests weren't managed effectively. Can you speak on that claim?
Man, we have done so much here in California in getting our forests into a healthy state. We have really, the governor and the legislature put in billions of dollars into wildfire resiliency projects, fuel thinning, fuels management work in and around communities and in the forest land areas. In fact, we set a goal to be able to treat 1 million acres each year by 2025. And we were able to do that several years ago. We have continued to increase our pace and scale, whether it be prescribed fire or mechanical treatment. So we are taking care of our forest. It's really important to note, though, that almost 50% of California is federally owned land, whether it be national forests or national park land or other lands managed by the federal government. But our federal partners here in California, they too have been doing their part. They really have helped us with that goal of treating, for them, about 500,000 acres, 500,000 acres of land in their jurisdiction. So federal, state, here in California, we are doing a lot, but our climate is changing faster than we're able to mechanically go in. Now, we will continue to increase the usage of prescribed fire, cultural burning, and other types of vegetation management. But really, the numbers show, and it's all available on our website. We provide access to the public to see exactly where these fuel reduction projects are going. The numbers show that California is really leading the effort towards fuels reduction.
Chief Berlant, I know that people will hear you say that and then look at the devastation that's being wrought onto California right now in the Palisades, look at 20,000 acres being burned there, look at 15,000 acres or more being burned around the Altadena, Pasadena area, and say, those two things are in conflict with each other. That to claim that we're leading in terms of being able to do these prescribed fires as mitigation efforts, and yet at the same time, we're seeing entire communities being burned to the ground and just thousands and thousands and thousands of acres in the Palisades being burned to the ground. So how do you reconcile those two things?
It's important to note that these two fires really started within the city limits. These are not wildland fires. They're not forest fires that burned into these communities. They started within the cities and then have moved out. And so while the fuel reduction work we have focused on is important and does make a difference. In fact, we have a whole fuels reduction effectiveness toolkit on our website where you can see in the last year, where were these fuel reduction projects and how did they impact and aid us in our firefight? But the fires we're talking about here, the Palisades and the Eaton fire, these two fires, again, were urban conflagrations. The work we need to do here now is really work to focus moving forward on how do we harden existing communities? What steps can we take to make sure that if one home catches on fire, even with these extreme winds, it doesn't spread one to the next? Because that is what we saw. No amount of fuel reduction, no amount of forest thinning and management would have made a difference in an urban conflagration. What we have to work here is stopping the pathways. Stopping if one home catches on fire from it being able to spread from the home to the fence, down to the next home, through the fence to the next home. These pathways, these fences, they're like wicks that carry the fire home to home to home. It is not fuel management that is the solution. It's home hardening, it's community hardening. That's what we need to keep doing more of.
Now, I know that there's been a lot of reporting about how since 2019, insurers in the state have dropped policies on 100,000 Californians. Now, I know this isn't your purview as the state fire marshal, but do you have any reaction to these moves by insurers who are leaving Californians vulnerable at a time like this?
Yeah, I can't speak to the complexities of the insurance industry, but what I can tell you is we've been working very closely with the insurance commissioner himself, with many of the insurance associations to work towards finding a solution. The insurance commissioner's recent regulations require that if homeowners are doing all the right things, if they're hardening their home, if they're clearing dead and dying vegetation, and so taking mitigation steps in their home, but also within their community, that should give them credit. They have bought down their risk. But this is a major challenge. When you have these major conflagrations, huge amounts of loss, that obviously is going to play an economic loss to their industry. But working with them to make sure that we're doing mitigations that matter, that buy down risk, homeowners that do that stuff should get credit. And that is efforts that the insurance commissioner's Safer from Wildfires insurance framework, that again, with mitigations that we are aligned with our insurance partners on: defensible space, home hardening, neighborhood level hardening, 0 to 5 foot ember resistant zone, which is that first zone. These things, we have an agreement that does buy down the risk, and insurance companies under the new requirements are insuring people. Again, I can't get into the details because I don't regulate insurance, but we're working hard to make sure that the mitigations we as firefighters know matter, that insurance companies are taking those into consideration in their pricing and their availability.
And finally, let's finish off with this. And I appreciate all the time you've given at such a busy time as we're in right now. But we've got a national audience watching here. What's your message to folks out there who may want to offer some help?
There are so many people right now that are without a home. They've lost everything. And so while we are today focused on firefighting and protecting structure defense so that more homes are not destroyed by these fires, there are so many nonprofit groups that are right now providing shelter, providing food, providing the basics. That's where the focus nationally. We need to come together as a nation. And as I have to note that in fires in the past that have done destruction, we have received that aid. But our hearts right now are really to focus on those that right now are in need, supporting nonprofit groups like the American Red Cross, for one. That is where people can help.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for all your time here. I know that there were a lot of questions that kind of required some answers here as rumors start to fly, but I know that how busy it is at this moment right here. So I appreciate you taking all this time. Chief Berlant, thank you so much.
Thanks.